They were all created to represent a perfect version of humanity.
This story is about a robot that a couple bought to make their work easier and fulfill all their needs. But as the robot starts to find its place in their lives, it begins to develop emotions and human feelings, and it falls in love with the wife. However, the twist in the story comes when the robot discovers its true reality, that it is not just an ordinary robot but something more. In the opening scene of this movie, we see a couple named James and Sophie moving into their new apartment. James's financial situation is not very strong, so they live in a small apartment and do all the household chores themselves. James is the only son of his father, who is a big businessman in the city, but for some reason, James chooses to live with Sophie instead of his father. Both are very happy in their simple life and love each other deeply. One day, James receives the news that his father has passed away. Before dying, his father transferred all his wealth and property to James, and now James has to take over his father's business. So they leave their small apartment and move into James's father's big house. But suddenly, Sophie doesn't feel comfortable in this new, luxurious life because she was used to living a normal life and preferred doing all the household work herself. On the very first day, she fires all the servants. When James comes home at night and finds out, he tries to explain to Sophie that she shouldn't have done that. He tells her that the house is too big and managing all the work alone will be difficult, so they need servants. But Sophie doesn't agree and says that they used to do all the work together before and can continue doing so now. After some discussion, they both come closer to each other again. As time passes, we see that James gets extremely busy with his father's business and doesn't get much time to spend with Sophie. Sophie, too, spends most of her time alone in the house and struggles to manage all the chores by herself. When James talks to a friend about this problem, his friend suggests a solution. The friend explains that there is a robotics company owned by a man named Julian, who creates robots that look exactly like humans and can do everything. He suggests that James should buy one of these robots to solve their problem. The next day, James takes Sophie to the company, where she is amazed to see the robots because they look just like real humans. At first, James and Sophie talk privately, wondering if these robots might become a danger to them in the future. But Julian assures them that there is no risk at all. He explains that these are AI robots, and his father spent his entire life developing them, while Julian himself spent half his life perfecting them. The robots will only do what they are commanded to do. To prove his point, Julian orders a robot named Henry to lick James's shoe, and Henry does exactly that. Seeing this, James and Sophie are completely convinced, and they decide to take Henry home. Once at home, Henry starts doing all the household work perfectly, making life much easier for Sophie and James. He handles all the tasks alone, which even multiple servants couldn't do before. Whenever James talks to Henry, the robot responds just like a human would. James starts spending his free time with Henry because the robot understands him well, and James begins to like him. However, Sophie feels a little uncomfortable with Henry at first. She finds it hard to accept that a robot, which looks exactly like a human and does all the household work alone, is now part of their lives. But slowly, she becomes impressed by the way Henry works and speaks gently. So, whenever James leaves for work, Sophie starts spending the rest of her time with Henry. Henry takes great care of Sophie's needs because his programming is designed to keep his owners happy. With Henry's arrival, James and Sophie's life, which had been struggling earlier, starts improving and their days pass smoothly. One morning, Henry brings breakfast for Sophie and James. Sophie asks Henry about love and human emotions, and he explains everything in great detail. Hearing this, Sophie is deeply impressed and starts seeing Henry not as a robot but as a person. However, when James notices Sophie asking such questions, he warns her, saying, "You shouldn't talk to him like he's a human. The way we treat him is how he'll react. If you make the mistake of treating him like a human, he'll start believing he is one, and that could cause problems for us in the future." But Sophie doesn't agree with him. Later that night, while Sophie and James are asleep, Sophie hears strange noises coming from Henry's room. She goes to check and finds Henry outside in the garden, sleeping. When she looks closely, she notices that Henry is reacting in his sleep as if he's dreaming. Suddenly, he wakes up and asks Sophie, "Where am I?" Sophie asks, "How did you get outside?" Were you dreaming? Henry nods in response.
Yes.
Shocked, Sophie wonders how a robot could possibly dream. She helps him back inside. Just then, James comes out and sees them together at this time of night. The next day, Julian is called to examine Henry. After checking him, Julian says there might have been a technical error, which is normal for any robot. Sophie then tells him, last night, I saw him reacting in his sleep like he was dreaming. How is that possible? Julian explains, Henry has been with you both for a while now. The way you treat him influences his behavior. These AI robots are highly advanced, they adapt based on how they're treated. Since you've been treating him like a human, he might have developed human-like emotions, causing him to dream. Hearing this, James gets angry at Sophie and says, this happened because of you. You're the one treating him like a human. This leads to a small argument between them.
You should think about doing the same.
In the next scene, James comes out of the bathroom and Henry enters. James says, shave me. Henry picks up the razor and starts shaving him. James asks, how did you know this was my razor? Sophie's trimmer was right next to it. Henry replies, my programming allows me to observe things quickly. It's part of my design. James then tries to make Henry understand, you need to remember one thing, you were built as a programmed machine to help humans. You are not human, and you must only do what you're told. That night, Sophie comes to the room but avoids talking to James, pretending to be tired, and goes to sleep. Later, we see Sophie and Henry talking to each other. Henry says, I've started thinking about emotions and love, and in those thoughts, I only see you. Then, Sophie asks Henry to give her a massage. As he does, Henry slowly leans in to kiss her, and Sophie, caught in the moment, starts kissing him back. Just as they begin to get intimate, Sophie suddenly wakes up, realizing it was all a dream. James asks, were you dreaming? Sophie says yes, but doesn't tell him the details, claiming she doesn't remember. A few days later, as James is about to leave for work, he sees Sophie and Henry laughing together by the pool. Jealousy flares up inside him. He goes to Julian and complains, because of Henry, my wife is drifting away from me. He's developing emotions. Julian dismisses it, saying that's impossible. Henry is just a robot, he can't feel emotions. He only follows commands. If someone projects desires onto him, he'll try to fulfill them, but that's just how he's programmed. Frustrated, James returns home and yells at Henry, from now on, you are forbidden from showing any human-like emotions. Later, Henry tells Sophie, James has ordered me not to talk to you too much. Angry, Sophie confronts James, leading to a heated argument. The fight escalates until Sophie storms out of the house. In the next scene, James and Henry are playing a game together. Henry tries to explain, before, you and Sophie spent so much time together. But when your business kept you busy, she started treating me like a human instead of a robot. That's what caused this misunderstanding. But James refuses to listen. Later, while James is in the bathroom, he asks Henry to shave him. Relaxed, James gives Henry a private command, which Henry obeys. But the next morning, James regrets his actions. He calls Sophie, asking her to come back home. When Sophie returns, Henry gives her a massage. But then, he suddenly kisses her. At first, Sophie is taken by the moment, until Henry confesses, I've fallen in love with you. Shocked, Sophie pushes him away and tells him to leave. When James comes home, Sophie tells him everything. Henry kissed me and said he loves me. Furious, James storms up to Henry and demands, why did you do that? Henry calmly replies, I acted based on the situation. Enraged, James slaps Henry hard and shuts down his system. He then calls Julian and demands that he take the robot away. But the next morning, Henry approaches Sophie, pleading, I don't want to leave. Maybe I misread the situation, but I belong here. He begs her to talk to James and even confesses, when you weren't home, James ordered me to do something inappropriate. Sophie is shocked and she confronts James at his office. After a long, painful conversation, they both realize their mistake. They had grown emotionally attached to Henry in ways they shouldn't have. Deciding to correct their error, they agree to send Henry back and return to their normal lives. But when they get home, Henry is gone. Searching for him, they find him standing alone outside the house. Confused, they ask, why are you here? Where is Julian? We called him to take you away. Henry reveals the horrifying truth. Julian came for me, but he ran when he realized I've uncovered the truth. Julian is a liar, a monster. He explains that Julian had always wanted to create robots superior to humans. After repeated failures, he resorted to kidnapping people, brainwashing them, and erasing their humanity, turning them into emotionless machines. I was one of his victims, Henry confesses. But when Sophie touched me, my human feelings started returning. Because I was never a robot. I was always human. Furious, James and Sophie report Julian to the police. The police raid his company, but when they arrive, Julian attacks, killing the officers. Just as he's about to kill James and Sophie, Henry leaps at Julian in a rage, beating him to death. Bleeding and broken, Henry then stabs himself. With his last breath, he whispers, "Forgive me for the pain I caused." Sophie and James weep uncontrollably, realizing too late that Henry's emotions, his love, his suffering, had been real all along. His humanity had been stolen from him, yet it never truly died. Years later, the final scene shows Sophie and James with their newborn son. They've named him Henry because no matter what, they could never forget the man who taught them that humanity isn't about a heartbeat, but about love, sacrifice, and the bonds we choose to keep. This story teaches us that emotions aren't confined to flesh and blood. They can exist in any form, even in those we mistake for machines. To be human isn't about biology, it's about the capacity to feel, to love, and to fight for what's right. On IMDb, this movie was rated by 4,800 people and has an average rating of 5.4. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe to this channel for more interesting videos.